What it do, everybody? It's your boy King Crowder coming back again with another edition of a lesson that we should know about some clarity, about some history that we didn't know. Today's lesson will be about setting the record straight on Uncle Tom. Josiah Henson, aka Uncle Tom. This theory of Uncle Tom was written by Harriet Stowe, referencing Josiah Henson in one of the most controversial novels of the 19th century. The reason why this novel was so controversial was because this was the first in-depth writing about slavery and what was actually happening in the South. We knew slavery was happening, but we never heard a first person from a slave perspective on it. The reason why it was such a big deal was because it painted Mr. Henson as a born leader, intelligent, well-liked, and respected by his enslaved peers. He was very young and became a minister at a very young age. God spoke to Mr. Henson and changed his heart. Because he was beaten and held down by an overseer at a young age, Mr. Henson was never be able to raise his shoulders above his shoulders. So he was never be able to hold his arms straight up. The reason why this happened, he was never fixed from that because they didn't want him to seek medical attention. Mr. Henson was never healed properly and never had the proper healing because enslaved didn't get that back in his time. So at a young age, he literally was almost a disabled person. The one thing that was so prominent about this gentleman is that he was very upstanding. And Mr. Henson's God-fearing personality, he really believed in the word of God. So his word was worth integrity, his actions and how he treated people. And the one thing that he learned very early on in life is that he kept these morals, but the people that was giving him the God's literature and to abide by did not. So he had a time when he was actually trying to buy his freedom away from his forward plantation owner. And when he tried to seek freedom to the gentleman, he noticed that the gentleman did not keep his word and honor his agreement. This imprinted in his mind that these people that are saying that the God-fearing mentality goes towards you, I don't have to oblige by it. He learned in that moment is that they were using a religious context to hammer down on the enslaved people. Mr. Henson knew that he had to look out for the people that were just like him. So Uncle Tom was actually the one helping out with the weigh-ins, giving them water, telling them when things were going to happen. He was virtually embedding in them things they need to be mindful for. He was actually the one, Mr. Henson was the one that we all need to be around. Uncle Tom was actually a daring aspiration because it made enslaved people, in their light have a very, very different far-fetched way of thinking. The reason why he was so predominant because he escaped slavery from Kentucky with his children. Mind you, they traveled at night and slept during the day. What Mr. Henson did that was so profound was that he had to carry his child. Mind him being a disabled person with a shoulder, he carried this smaller child during the whole route. And while he's carrying his child with his wife, they're traveling at night trying to find free location. One of his most loving memory that Mr. Henson mentioned is that his children needed water. He had no way to get them water, so he literally had to take off his shoe, fill it up with water, and allow his children to drink it. And the reason why it was such a refreshing thing because how humble and appreciative his children were at this time. They were very appreciative of what the dad did for them during their time of need. Mr. Henson, referenced this during his migration of the book. As he began to travel at night, he found his way all the way to Lake Erie to get to Canada because Canada was where the free enslaved people lived. All of this happened when he was 41 years of age. So mind you, he was disabled, he couldn't lift much, and he escaped chattel slavery for his family, even at a ripe old age. The reason why he began to get such a national prevalence is because he met people in Canada that wanted to discuss who he was. So as he began to travel and speak, the novel came about and spoke about him. In America, the whites in America demonized the story of Uncle Tom. They gave it a negative connotation. Uncle Tom had stories made about him, blackface, and imagery, But most people never knew the original story about this individual. Everybody heard what the popular media image of him, and they never did the proper research. So in our generation and below, even in mine, Uncle Tom is viewed in a negative connotation, when Uncle Tom is actually somebody that we all should be like, wow, to have a person deemed loyal, hardworking, and actually helped enslaved during the time of enslavement is a very positive aspect of thing to be. But it is such a demonized word and saying most do not know the history. 3 fascinating things about Uncle Tom that he did is he spoke to the Queen of England. He spoke to multiple groups. He began to be an abolitionist. He also established what was known as the man taking care of his family ideology. Now, it was demonized heavily. That's what they wanted to infuriate that name. But Uncle Tom was a man that could do whatever he could do for his family, even being disabled. Most people do not realize how these stereotypes still affect us in history when you see people like W.E.B. Du Bois versus Booker T and different stories of people. Most people only saw what was being promoted. They never went back to Miss Harriet Stowe's original novel to barge off that negative connotation. The reason why it's such a very interesting history, y'all, I want you to think about it when you reference it. History always gives the cause, the effect of something, even if you don't know the middle ground of it. The cause was, he's an Uncle Tom, he hates us. The effect was, it's a negative word about him. Most people don't have that in-between narrative to get the confusion out. I just want to chime back in with y'all again with some history that you do not know, that I think is very important to always get clarity. Who the background of Uncle Tom is, what was his novel about, and who he was as a person. Tremendous history that I'll drop some links to below so you can see and check out for yourself. But I highly recommend you educate and read yourself. Peace.